more mass protests in D.C. and Florida today. We're with them live.
I'm Nicole Burley. It is Monday, July 26th. This is Rush Hour. Thanks so much for joining us. Here is what's happening in your nation right now. Cuban American protesters imploring the White House to take action against the communist regime weeks after anti-government protests. News Nation live on the ground in Miami as demonstrators gather once again tonight. Meanwhile, the first federal agency to mandate the COVID vaccine as masks go back on in cities all across America. Deadly flash flooding in Arizona. Rescue crews still searching for people swept away in a wave of monsoons. First responders saving people stranded on top of cars. But tonight we know a 4-year-old girl among those confirmed dead. But we do begin with video you have to see tonight. This is out of New York. A mother holding her infant daughter hit by a car as she crosses the street. That horrific scene caught on surveillance camera. But this really just the beginning. Bystanders who rushed in to help realized that the 8-month-old child was pinned underneath the car. News Nation's Adrian Bankert joining us now. Adrian, this does end so much better than it looks like it will, but it is so hard to watch.
That's right, Nicole. A truly heart-stopping rescue. All of it caught on camera, from the crash to the Herculean efforts by police and total strangers. Now, we do want to warn you again, the video you are about to see will leave you breathless. Let's start with the impact. At the top left of the screen, you see a car and a woman holding a baby, that car careening into a parked vehicle, and then the mother and that baby going through a barbershop storefront. Watch that video again. That car taking a wide turn, hitting the curb, a parked car, and then that baby and mother. And this is what happened. Thankfully, 2 police officers nearby heard the whole thing and came running. Their body cameras show us what happened next.
We got a baby under the vehicle.
You heard that correctly. The car was on top of that 8-month-old little girl. All of this going on inside the barbershop. 2 officers and Good Samaritans lifted that car up to free the infant.
Can you pull? Somebody's got to pull the baby. Grab the baby. Grab the baby. Come on. I got it.
Oh my gosh. You can't even imagine. But all of that adrenaline pumping, amazingly, police saved that baby girl. She does have a skull fracture and 3rd-degree burns to her back and foot. The mom has a serious femur fracture. They're both still being treated tonight, but thankfully they survived this, and no one else was seriously hurt. Nicole.
Yes, so glad they survived. Adrian, do we know anything about the driver involved?
Well, we know, yes, this was definitely a case of DUI. Yonkers police arresting the driver, a 43-year-old man. He's facing multiple charges, including driving while intoxicated and vehicular assault. Police say he was also driving with a suspended license, and they found alcohol in his car. His passenger also arrested. Nicole.
Wow. All right. Adrian, thank you. Well, 3 top stories to get to now out of New York, D.C., and Miami. Brian Enton live at a protest against the Cuban government. So, Brian, we know this is not the only one today.
Yeah, Nicole, we've seen the protests happening here in Miami for weeks, but right now there is a massive protest also happening in Washington, D.C. Thousands of Cuban Americans have descended on the nation's capital. Busloads of people from cities throughout the entire country. They started off at the White House, they marched to the Cuban embassy, and then they ended up at the U.S. Capitol. Almost all of them chanting that they want U.S. intervention. They want the military to intervene in Cuba and take out the communist government. Also new today, interesting images out of Havana. 2 massive Russian cargo jets landed in Havana, claiming to be carrying aid and also food and water and other items like that for the Cuban people. Of course, Cuba is a close ally of Russia. Most of the protesters we spoke to today said they're not interested in handouts from other countries. What they want right now is freedom.
We're coming outside because Cuban people need freedom. Freedom, only we need freedom. We need for Cuba.
In Cuba, the government killed the people. We need help from Biden, from USA.
And back to those jets full of supplies from Russia. Many of the protesters we've spoken to have questioned whether the regular Cuban people will even get any of those supplies, or if it will just go to the Cuban elite and to the government officials. Nicole?
All right, Brian, yeah, those are definitely fair questions there. All right, thank you. Let's get to D.C. now. For the first time since the start of the pandemic, the federal government is now mandating the COVID vaccine for some government workers. Allison Harris live for us tonight in D.C. So, Allison, what do we know about this new vaccine requirement?
Well, Nicole, the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, is requiring its frontline healthcare workers to get vaccinated. And this is significant because, as you said, this is the first federal agency to make this vaccine mandate. It applies to doctors, nurses, and other workers who are dealing with patients. The employees will have 8 weeks to get their shots, or they will face penalties if they don't. The president confirming this news from the Oval Office just hours ago.
Yes, Veteran Affairs is going to, in fact, require that all docs working in facilities are going to have to be vaccinated.
And there have been questions as to whether the president will require vaccinations for military members or for other federal workers. No news on those fronts tonight. This comes as there are new models that are projecting that COVID cases will continue to accelerate this summer and into fall, with cases and deaths peaking, according to one model, in mid-October. The president's spokeswoman confirming today that there are still active discussions about whether the Biden administration will follow CDC guidance that could be updated, requiring masks for those who are fully vaccinated. All of this being considered as variants spread, making up the majority of cases across the country. Nicole?
Yeah, we'll see if we get some update on that guidance. All right, Allison, thank you. Well, the vaccine mandates not only at the federal level. News Nation's Tom Negevin live in New York, where city workers will now be required to get the shot or face the consequences, Tom.
Exactly right, Nicole. The situation unveiled here in New York City today and across the country in the state of California, very similar to what Allison was just describing at the VA. Municipal workers here in New York City, police, firefighters, teachers will have to get the COVID vaccine or submit to regular COVID testing. That would begin around September 13th, mid-September, when kids go back to school. No accident there. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has already unveiled a similar mandate for public health care workers. And this mandate comes with an appeal to private businesses to enact similar or even tougher mandates for their own workers in the private sector. Just last week, part of an effort to speed up the vaccination as the city faces the prospect of a third wave, given the rise of the Delta variant. We're talking about 340,000 municipal workers here in New York. Parents here extraordinarily worried, and this is part of this, about the return to school and the level of vaccination in schools vis-a-vis the level of COVID positivity in the New York City area. Teachers say they're concerned about that as well. The teachers union says about 60% of its members are fully vaccinated at this point. Parents and many other teachers worried about that other 40% and the Delta variant. On the other side of the country, the state of California announcing today what it bills as the strongest vaccine mandate enforced in the entire country, at least at this point. And what's interesting is what just came along with that from the Democratic governor of the state of California, Gavin Newsom. Very, very vehemently denouncing a lot of the misinformation and propaganda, politicization, as he puts it, of mask mandates, vaccine mandates, and the vaccine itself, which the CDC and the AMA are strongly pointing out today, Nicole, are safe and effective against COVID-19 and the Delta variant.
Yeah, strong feelings on both sides about these mandates. All right, Tom, thank you. Well, from New York to Missouri, let's give you a live look now. This is St. Louis, where an indoor mask mandate is back as new Delta variant cases continue climbing. News Nation's Dan Gray from our St. Louis station KTVI live for us tonight. So, Dan, how are people reacting there?
Well, it's kind of a mixed reaction when you talk to people. You see some people with masks, some people without. We're at a vaccination clinic here for the Melville School District, which is in South St. Louis County. It's going on at a Melville Fire Protection District firehouse here in a building behind it. And they are understanding that they are emphasizing and prioritizing vaccinations. But health orders went into effect today mandating that individuals in St. Louis City and St. Louis County wear a mask indoors to stop the rapid spread of the Delta variant of the coronavirus. Now, how do you enforce such an order? Well, St. Louis County Executive Dr. Sam Page said they will take each apparent violation on a case-by-case basis. He said the last time, earlier this year, when a mask order was in effect and mandated, he said most people agreed and obeyed and followed the mandate. He is expecting that most people will do the same this time. He says anyone who doesn't get a vaccination, he calls an outlier, and says they are doing so apparently for a political agenda.
Yeah, the enforcement can certainly be tough there. All right, Dan, thank you. Let's head from St. Louis now to Washington, where senators trying to seal a bipartisan infrastructure deal before August recess. NewsNation's Joe Khalil live from there now. So, Joe, what is the holdup on this now?
Well, it's a couple things, Nicole, but I can tell you things got a lot more complicated on this $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure deal this morning. Former President Trump basically threw a wrench into the negotiations and possibly altered the fate of the bill itself. He put out a statement earlier today, and we can put it up on the screen here. He says Republicans are being absolutely savaged by Democrats on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And he went on to say, don't do the infrastructure deal. Wait until after we get proper election results in 2022. Now, that statement from the former president probably makes life complicated for a lot of Republicans who may be on the fence about supporting this bill. They're going to have to decide now whether they vote for a bill that is, frankly, popular among the American people and probably has got some good stuff in there for their states, but they live with the perception that they would go against, they would oppose the former president's position. Clearly, that's not a place where a lot of Republicans want to be. Donald Trump is still the most popular figure in the party, and we know that Democratic leaders are at least concerned that that statement this morning possibly could tank this deal.
We have the opportunity right now to actually accomplish something good for the American people. Will our Republican colleagues follow the absurd demands of a disgraced former president and his media allies?
Now, that's just one complication, Nicole. Today, we were supposed to get details on what the bipartisan bill actually looked like. We have not gotten those yet. We've heard from a number of senators that they are still working out some of their differences. If we get any new information, we'll certainly let you all know about it. Nicole?
All right, Joe, live in D.C. for us tonight. Thank you. Well, back to New York, where Governor Andrew Cuomo questioning the credibility of the Attorney General's investigation into sexual misconduct allegations levied against him. Cuomo made the comments during his first news conference since being deposed. NewsNation's Henry Rossoff from our New York City station WPIX live with the latest. So, Henry, does the governor believe this investigation is politically motivated?
Absolutely, Nicole. What he did was very different from what we've seen from Governor Cuomo in the past when he's chosen to comment on the investigation. He went directly after June Kim and Ann Clark. Those are the two independent investigators that were hired by Attorney General Tish James to look into the claims of sexual misconduct. Now, remember, the governor himself a couple of months ago, he's the one that asked for this investigation. He really thought that it would vindicate him, but more claims came forward. The investigation expanded to looking into possible abuses of power. His staff started attacking Attorney General James, calling all of this politically motivated, specifically saying she wants his job. But this is the first time Cuomo, after going dark for 10 days after Kim and Clark actually deposed him a couple of weekends ago, and he came out swinging against the independent investigators themselves, Nicole.
Henry Rossoff live for us tonight in New York. Thank you. Well, switching gears now, scenes like this becoming all too common in Arizona this month. Flash flooding, trapping families on top of their cars, waiting for help. This family saved, but not everyone has been so lucky. NewsNation's Marty Hughes joining us now. So, Marty, you have an update on the search and rescue efforts.
Well, you've heard, Nicole, turn around, don't drown. That's the situation right now in Arizona. In Pima, about 3 hours northeast of Tucson, police did confirm they found the body of a missing 4-year-old girl. Her name is Macy. Her mom called police for help when their car got stuck in those floods on Thursday. Rescuers were able to help the rest of them, but they could not, sadly, find Macy. Her body was found in the Gila River today. And over in Cottonwood, Arizona, just under 2 hours north of Phoenix, crews still looking for a 16-year-old, Faith Moore. Just like Macy, Faith's car got caught in the flash flood Saturday. She called 911 for help. Some of her belongings were found yesterday, Nicole, but sadly no sign of Faith to this point. Police are using canines, Black Hawk helicopters, and also boats to look for her. In a similar situation near Phoenix on Friday, 2 people were stuck on top of a truck. They were saved and they were flown to safety, but it just shows you a little rain can turn deadly real fast, and that's the situation in Arizona. These rains have let up some today, but more storms expected later this week, Nicole. It's a situation we're going to be watching very closely in the days to come.
All right, Marnie, thank you. Well, a deadly sandstorm in central Utah, so powerful, police say drivers could not see. These sandstorms causing a series of crashes along a freeway, killing 8 people. News Nation's Haley Hendricks from her Salt Lake City station KTVX has the very latest.
Police say 22 vehicles were involved in the string of deadly crashes Sunday afternoon. Today, you can still see the markings of car brands spray painted onto the freeway. Utah Highway Patrol officials say a sandstorm here in Millard County encapsulated travelers and their vehicles in the storm. Limited visibility led to some minor crashes, police say, that then blocked the road. In the process of coming to a stop, officials say a semi appears to have rear-ended a pickup truck. The most significant crashes, police say, then happened behind the semi, with 2 vehicles becoming wedged underneath the back of the trailer when they were hit from behind. This crash has claimed the lives of 8 people. Of those killed, police say 4 were children under the age of 15. Now, police say if you're caught driving in a sandstorm, to treat it like driving in fog. If you can't see, slow down. Reporting in Millard, Haley Hendricks, News Nation.
All right, Haley, thank you. Well, flooding, sandstorms, and now wildfires. There are currently more than 80 large fires burning across more than a dozen states. More than 500,000, 1.5 million acres already burned. So let's get to Chief Meteorologist Albert Ramon. Albert, are the severe storms that brought all that flooding, are they helping firefighters at all?
It's going to help a little bit. That's mainly the good news. I'll show you what could be a tricky part over the next 24 hours in just a second. Let's start off with a big wide perspective of the Doppler radar. You see the flash flood concerns continuing in Southern California, stretching into central areas of Nevada, and already starting to see some of this activity pick up where the fires are burning. This is a look at future radar, and through the evening hours, moisture continuing around the Tamarack fire, by the overnight moving around the Dixie fire in north central areas of California, and then south central Oregon. That's the Bootleg fire. Expecting showers there starting tomorrow morning and continuing through tomorrow afternoon. Here's the tricky part for firefighters. Yes, it's good news. We're getting some rain, 1/10 to maybe 2/10 of an inch, but some of this activity could come in with lightning. This is our lightning model. Anytime you see white and yellow, that's a potential for lightning strikes starting tonight through the day tomorrow from not just north central California, but stretching all the way off towards the east and northeast in Idaho, and seeing a repeat of that on Wednesday. So here's the active big fires right now. A little bit of lightning activity and moisture around the Tamarack fire south of Lake Tahoe. Again, we'll see some of that rainfall, maybe 2/10 of an inch over the next 24 hours around the Dixie fire, and eventually tomorrow morning through about this time tomorrow in south central Oregon around the Bootleg fire, where firefighters now have some pretty good control out of that fire, 53% contained. Nicole?
Right now, China leads the Olympics in medal counts, with the U.S. not far behind. But some are saying Team USA is struggling a bit, not coming out of the gate as strong as in the past. News Nation's Jack Doles joins us from a very rainy Tokyo with a look at everything Olympics. So, Jack, is the critique of Team USA fair, or is it premature?
I think it's a little premature. As Aaron Rodgers once said, relax. Team USA, you say, just 1 medal behind China in the medal count. I think some of the hysteria, maybe, if that's the word, would be a terrible performance by the U.S. men's basketball team in their opener against France. They were lethargic. They'll come out. And, of course, Simone Biles, which shows you her greatness, that she stepped out of bounds in 2 of the apparatuses and still leads the all-around competition. I think she'll get it back together, put together a great performance, win that all-around.
Speaking of great performance, talk to us about USA swimmer Caleb Dressel giving his teammate his gold medal. What a moment.
He threw his medal to Brooks Curry in the stands there. Now, Brooks did swim in the preliminary, took Caleb's place. A lot of times you'll see some of these top-notch swimmers get a little rest during the prelims. We're so deep and so strong. Brooks does get an Olympic medal for being part of that preliminary.
There's some more controversy when it comes to uniforms and some of the women athletes.
The German women's gymnastics team, normally you see the women gymnasts out there in the leotards that are bikini cut and down to about the hip. Well, they wore it all the way down to the ankles. And they did this as pushing back against the sexualization of women in gymnastics. I think this is getting a lot of support from the women's gymnastics community and other teams out here in Tokyo.
Yeah, certainly getting a lot of support with that. All right, Jack, thank you so much. We will check in with you again tomorrow night. Let's head tonight on a rush hour body cam video of a 75-year-old man falling to the ground after being tased by police. That man now taking legal action, saying officers had no reason to come into his home. And the FAA now getting involved in the billionaire space race. Why the government is cracking down on who is and is not an astronaut. That's definitely not the news a pair of billionaires wants to hear after spending some pretty big bucks to blast off into space. The FAA changing the rules for what qualifies as a space flight. News Nation correspondent Marky Martin joining us live in Dallas. Marky, the U.S. tightening the definition of the word astronaut. So does that mean Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson may not yet be astronauts?
Well, Nicole, it's interesting. There are really no concrete answers yet. However, based on this, these updated guidelines from the FAA, it would seem as though both men would fall short of reaching that criteria. And by the way, too, this all came down. The timeline of this is no coincidence. The updates came last Tuesday. That was the day that Jeff Bezos went up to space. And these are guidelines that haven't been changed since 2004. So this is how big of an event both of these launches have been. According to the FAA, you have to be an astronaut if you've traveled 50 miles above Earth's surface into space. So check for both of those men. And also wanted to read this. The agency said that they have to, quote, demonstrate activities during flight that were essential to public safety or contributed to human spaceflight safety. And while they certainly helped usher in this new era or this new age of space tourism, it is kind of hard to argue that being buckled in and enjoying the view demonstrated anything essential in flight. Not diminishing their accomplishments, but just the finite rules of this does make it seem that they would fall short. You also have to be nominated for those commercial wings, and then the only other two ways to get it, Nicole, are either through the military or through NASA.
All right, so being buckled in may not count, Marky, but both the men, their crew members, all received those astronaut wings when they returned to Earth. So were those just for show then? And is there any chance Bezos and Branson may become now certified astronauts?
Great questions. The first ones, the pins were decorative. So both of those pins were designed by both of those men's companies. There is a glimmer of hope for Branson and Bezos, because according to these new FAA updates, you can receive honorary wings based on merits from the FAA administrator. And again, there is no doubt that this very well, might come for those two men. They have spent a lot of time, money. They've created a lot of jobs for the people who brought these dreams to fruition. And lastly, you didn't ask me about this, Nicole, but I do feel it necessary to also add that the FAA has created its own field office out of Houston, Texas, just to keep tabs and safety tabs on the goings-on of both of those companies out of New Mexico and Texas. Nicole.
Yeah, those men have certainly spent a lot of time and, yes, a lot of money. All right, Marky, thank you. Well, still ahead tonight on Rush Hour, the prosecution and defense rest in the kidnapping and murder trial of a South Carolina college student. News Nation live at the courthouse next. And later, California taking drastic measures, cutting off water, begging people to conserve as rivers and reservoirs dry up. Why this drought could be the worst the state has ever seen. Welcome back. Here's what's happening in your nation tonight. A Colorado man taking legal action after he says he was tasered by police with zero warning. All of it captured on police body cam. What we know about the moments leading up to this confrontation. And the West Coast in the grips of a devastating drought. Rivers down to historically low levels. State officials already pleading with people to cut back. But now the power grid could be in danger. And could college sports as we know it be coming to an end? We are breaking down the predicted fallout from Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. But let's turn first to South Carolina, where both the prosecution and defense rested today in the kidnapping and murder trial of a 21-year-old college student. Today we learned harrowing new details about Samantha Josephson's final moment. She was last seen getting into a car she thought belonged to her Uber driver. News Nation's Jason Raven from our station WSPA in Spartanburg, South Carolina, joining us live tonight. Jason, can you tell us what happened in court today?
Nicole, one of the final witnesses we heard from was a pathologist who conducted the autopsy on Josephson's body. Now, he said she was stabbed more than 100 times and spent over an hour showing jurors different photos from her death. Now, according to the pathologist, Josephson was stabbed in the head, neck, arms, chest, and back. Now, she had about 120 stab wounds, and some of those could have been that fatal blow that killed her. Now, the expert testified he was puzzled about some of the wounds because they appeared to be parallel on her body. Now, the state then handed the pathologist the multi-tool they showed jurors last week. Now, investigators say this was found in a trash can on the back porch of Rowland's ex-girlfriend's house. And they also say testing very strongly supports that Josephson's DNA and blood was on the blades of that multi-tool.
They are bent at the tip, and they're the size appropriate for the wounds that I saw. This is the weapon.
We learned a lot of details about Josephson's final moments, and the prosecution and defense rested their case today, and the jurors will be listening to closing arguments tomorrow starting at 9:30, and we'll conduct jury deliberations after that. Nicole?
Jason, thank you. In Colorado, a 75-year-old man suing a police department claiming they tased him without warning. He says it caused him to suffer a stroke that left him in a wheelchair. News Nation's Rob Lowe from our Denver station KDVR joining us now. So, Rob, what's in that lawsuit?
Well, he wants justice and accountability, Nicole. Michael Clark says he suffered a stroke just 2 days after he was tased, and now he has to use a wheelchair. He says it's not good enough to him that only one of the two officers involved in this incident has been fired and charged for what happened to him 8 weeks ago. We have body cam footage to show you of Michael Clark being tased moments after he opens his door to a pair of police officers who never announced who they were when they were knocking. They were responding to a neighbor's report that Clark had punched her in the mouth. Turns out Clark had never met this new neighbor and says he merely pounded on her wall to get her to be quiet so he could sleep. Prosecutors say he was tased without cause or warning. In the hospital, he suffered heart problems, that stroke that we mentioned, and then a burst appendix.
All I want is the truth, justice, and I don't want anybody else to suffer what I have suffered myself.
Clark says he's thankful for the body cam because he says it proves he did nothing wrong and was only tased because police took the word of a neighbor, even though there are reports that suggest this neighbor was visibly drunk, had no serious injuries or blood on her clothes, but again was extremely intoxicated. Clark says both officers should be fired, both the officer who tased him and the officer who pointed a gun at him and didn't prevent the other officer from tasing him. His lawsuit, he hopes, will bring accountability to the Idaho Springs Police Department. Back to you, Nicole.
All right, Rob. Yeah, we'll see what happens here. All right, thank you. Still ahead tonight on Rush Hour. Texas and Oklahoma bolt for the SEC. Could this be the beginning of the end of college sports as we know it? Plus, nearly a week after Kanye West's listening party at the Atlanta Falcons Stadium, still no album, and the rapper reportedly living in the arena. Just how long he could stay. Extreme drought conditions causing problems out west and could leave people in the dark. Across the west, lake levels right now at historic lows. And you can see just how much water levels have dropped in just the past few months. Images from Lake Oroville in California. This is in April. Show what the lake looked like with a capacity just over 40%. But now that capacity down in the 20s. Just 3 months later, the drought leading state leaders to urge people to cut back on water usage. And now the dry conditions could affect the power supply of more than 25 million people. NewsNation correspondent Nancy Liu live in Los Angeles tonight. So Nancy, what are the drought restrictions like there?
Well, Nicole, nothing is mandatory yet, but you can see how dry things are here in California. Governor Gavin Newsom has asked residents to voluntarily cut water use by 15%. A push for energy conservation may be next. There is much less water lapping at the shores of many lakes and reservoirs these days. Images out of the west make clear it is not a normal year, and what little water is left is evaporating faster due to heat.
In normal years, California gets about 15% of its electricity from hydroelectric power. We might get half of that amount this year just because it's been so dry.
With California's Lake Oroville at just 27% capacity, the Department of Water Resources may soon shut down the hydroelectric power plant there for the first time ever. The same may happen soon to the south due to a very depleted Lake Mead in Nevada and not nearly enough water at the Hoover Dam.
It just keeps going down and down and down.
The situation could eventually impact the power supply for about 25 million people in Arizona, Nevada, and Southern California. Many hopes are drying up in about a dozen states due to extreme drought. In Utah, Great Salt Lake is at an historic low, and the small town of Echo has literally run dry. Water has to be purchased and trucked in.
The whole town is policing each other on using drinking water for watering their lawns.
Now, the possible shutdown of hydroelectric power plants would require that energy be shifted from elsewhere in the grid, and that would possibly lead to more flex alerts and calls for energy and water conservation in the months to come. Nicole?
Yes, so many people impacted there. All right, Nancy, thank you. Well, the universities of Texas and Oklahoma sent a clear message today. They plan to leave the Big 12 conference at the end of their agreement, expiring in 2025. So let's bring in News Nation's Roger Wallace. He's sports director at KXAN in Austin. Roger, why are Texas and OU doing this? Is this about money? Is this about competition? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, Nicole, all of the above. I think they're looking at the landscape of college athletics and finding a landing spot for the next 25, 50, 75 years. Southeastern Conference, obviously the best football conference. There's more money to be made. Texas has plenty of money. You mentioned recruiting, competition, all of the above. And it's ironic because they're in lockstep with their most heated rival in the University of Oklahoma.
All right, so is it fair to say, is this the beginning of the end of college football and NCAA sports as we've known them for essentially the last century?
Well, maybe the beginning of the end as we know it, Nicole, was the adoption of the name, image, and likeness where college athletes can make money. And I think that's part of this move now. These kids can make money. That's off the table. That's not going to be a big topic anymore. Again, I think it's about Texas and Oklahoma trying to position themselves, thinking that behind me, Royal Texas Memorial Stadium, they don't get great home schedules because they always play Oklahoma and Dallas. That's never an option here. And they don't get terribly excited about that Big 12 schedule. That will all change regardless of the SEC teams that will come in here. Of course, the big one everyone's talking about here is renewing the rivalry with Texas A&M. They haven't played since A&M left the Big 12 Conference in 2011. And, of course, Nicole, A&M not happy about this.
Yeah, A&M not happy about that. All right, so many changes, Roger. What is next in this process?
Well, now that Texas has informed the Big 12, they can formally apply for membership to the SEC, and then the SEC would vote. They need 11 of 14, but you kind of get the feeling that that's already happened in some way, shape, or form for us to get this far. And then the question is the timing. That grant of rights you talked about, that goes through 24-25. Hard to imagine they play in the Big 12 for 4 more years. This year for sure, maybe next year, but you could see the change as early as next football season.
All right, changes are coming. Roger, thank you for that update. All right, coming up on Rush Hour, we've heard of people moving out west, but what about west moving in? What we know about Kanye's indefinite stay at the Atlanta Falcons Stadium nearly a week after his listening party. Rapper Kanye West living inside Atlanta's NFL Stadium as he puts the finishing touches on his new album. He was in Atlanta for a massive listening event at the stadium Thursday, and that album was initially scheduled to be released the next day, but it's since been pushed back a few weeks. And News Nation correspondent Janelle Fort live for us tonight outside the stadium in Atlanta. Janelle, maybe I should say his temporary residence. How long has he been staying there long? Is he planning to stay there for a little bit longer?
Well, you know, Nicole, we know that he's been here at least since Thursday, since that listening party. He's taking artists in residence to new highs with this stay. Reportedly, he's got a studio inside. They've set up living quarters and possibly a chef. And there's this picture circulating online of them with this makeshift recording studio in one of the locker rooms here. Now, rumors of West staying here at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium started over the weekend with this video of the rapper at one of the Atlanta United FC soccer games, walking through the stands. You see him, he's in that red puffy suit, the same suit that he wore during that listening party with that nylon thing over his head. And, you know, this is an album that has been highly anticipated by fans. It's his 10th studio album. It's named after his late mother, Donda. On Thursday, the stadium was packed out. It was sold out, 60,000 people here for that listening party. But there was one issue. Apparently, the album isn't done yet. That's why he's inside now. We talked to officials here at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They've confirmed that he's inside working on that album. We talked to a member of his camp. They also told us that the album now pushed back to August 6th. That's the new release date. And so hopefully that's what ended up happening. But Nicole, you know, this isn't too much out of the ordinary for Kanye West. He's always been a pretty erratic superstar.
Well, I have to say, when it comes to residences, I mean, you know, square footage there, pretty good. All right, Janelle Fort, thank you. We continue tonight live from our News Nation headquarters in Chicago. Here are some other top stories we are watching right now. Thousands of Cuban Americans from all over the country marched today in Washington, D.C. Many say they want the U.S. military to intervene and take out the Cuban dictatorship. Their appeal comes after Cubans across the island took to the streets to protest food shortages and soaring prices during the COVID crisis. And New York City has announced a vaccine or weekly test mandate for its entire city workforce, while California will require the same for government workers. Those mandates begin in August and come as new Delta variant cases continue rising. We're following updates about a teen missing north of Phoenix. The sheriff's office says they've added more resources to this search. Faith Moore disappeared Saturday after she was swept up in flash flooding. Tonight, a SWAT team is involved in the search. They're also using extra manpower to dig out debris as they look for her. Recovery crews in South Florida have now identified all of the victims of the Surfside condo collapse. Family members confirmed 54-year-old Estelle Hedaya was the 98th victim pulled from that site. Rescue crews spent the last 4 weeks picking through the pile of rubble. Authorities do say there are no more bodies to be found. President Biden says the U.S. combat mission in Iraq will be finished by the end of the year, with the U.S. shifting to an advisory role. He met today with Iraq's prime minister at the White House. No word on how many of the 2,500 U.S. troops currently in the country will remain there. And the chair of former President Trump's inaugural committee says he is 100% innocent. Tom Barrack pleaded not guilty today in a Brooklyn courtroom to charges of secretly lobbying the U.S. on behalf of the United Arab Emirates. Prosecutors say he used his friendship with Trump to influence foreign policy. Barrack now wears an ankle monitoring bracelet and is subject to a curfew while he awaits trial. And some new developments as Britney Spears fights to regain control of her life. Today, the pop star's attorney filed a petition asking for Jason Rubin to be named the new conservator of her estate. If a judge approves that request, Rubin would replace her father, Jamie Spears, who's been in charge of her financial decisions for the past 13 years. Rubin is a CPA who specializes in forensic accounting and could help untangle her case. Well, how about this? Dramatic dashcam video catches a meteor streaking across the skies over the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Look at that. There were reports the fireball could be seen from as far away as Oklahoma and Louisiana. Wow. And the North Texas fireball, not the only one recorded last night. How about this? Thousands of miles away, a similar site in southern Scandinavia. An unusually large meteor illuminated parts of Norway with a powerful flash of light. So, Albert, not UFOs here.
No, not this time, not at least. You know, the average size of a meteor or shooting star that you see in the night sky is the size of a grain of sand. So these, the one in Texas and the one in Norway, much, much larger than that. A little bit of science for you. This body of rock, when it's out in outer space, it's a meteoroid. As it burns through the atmosphere, in particular the mesosphere, what we see is that brightness that you see right there. It's considered a meteor. And if it makes it to the ground, it's a meteorite. So do we get a meteorite fall? We'll have to wait and see.
Albert with all the knowledge. All right, thank you. That is all for Rush Hour tonight. You can follow me on social media. Just search Nicole Burley, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Next up, the Dowlin Report later tonight on Balance with Leland Vitter, followed by News Nation Prime and Banfield. Have a great night.